Yes, so those were all fictional names used in the film. The characters were loosely based around primarily my brother and I. My brother was a world-class sprinter. He was ranked in the top 10 of the 100 meters for 10 years. And I'll take this chance to tell you an interesting story as to how he actually got into the Olympic Games before I come back to that question. So he was studying at the University of Idaho in a place called Moscow, Idaho, which is about 8 hours drive from Calgary. And he drove to Calgary to watch the Olympic Games. And while he was there, after the first week of the games, at the start of the second week, we were training on the foreman, and an athlete got injured. And the coach who left me outside, said, well, why isn't he on the sled? Which was my brother, Chris. And George Fitch took some bottles of Appleton rum and some vacations in Jamaica and went to the powers that be. And in 3 hours, my brother was fully accredited and in the Olympic Games and on the sled and in the crash. And so the running scenes and that whole thing from Cool Runnings were based on his experiences. So we did sit down with the writers and with the producer, with the director, talk it through, and we had some kind of input and had to agree to the final script, and that's what came out. But it was fictionalized in terms of the names. I like to say I've warmed to it over the years. I did not like Cool Runnings when I first saw it. And when I first saw it was a premiere red carpet event, and the stars were there and we were there and there was clapping. I went on the stage before, and I sat and watched that movie, and man, I was annoyed. But what I've come to realize over the years is that Cool Runnings is not a documentary on my life. It's a feature-length film. It set out to be funny, and it was. It captured a good spirit, and most importantly, it stood the test of time. It still hits the Disney top 5 requests for Christmas, and this is from the cable requests and so on. Now that there's Disney Plus, I'm not sure how they would measure that or what's going on. But you know, that's 30 years and the movie is still going on. So it's a bit of a cult show now. Well, it had its challenges. So this is the in the military life, a lot of stuff is a set piece. I mean, things are set up for you. Guys have been doing this for hundreds of years. They know what to do. Everything is written down in a manual. You know, everything is done. I tell you the lengths to which the military go, which is sort of a sad story. A friend of mine, very close friend, was killed in an operation in Jamaica, and then you know they pulled out the page of the manual for that, and I was assigned to be the liaison between the family and the military. And part of what was in that manual is that I had to go to his house and search it for letters, anything compromising, anything that would have been embarrassing, and collect all of that and bring it back to the headquarters, so to spare the wife and family. Of course, he didn't have anything going on, but that's the level of detail that the military goes to. So that's, you know, that makes life simple. When you get out of that, then you discover that there is no playbook, and you have to start to figure things out yourself, and that isn't easy. And then you're dealing with people who weren't necessarily in the military themselves, and you can't deal with them as if you have some military relationship where either they're a subordinate or a superior. So those were skills that I had to develop. But the most difficult transition that I've made is from athlete to business, which is sort of, I'd always been in business. But when you're an athlete, you have a season, you have races, and it's easy to set goals for those races. You know, the preseason makes the athlete, you put in the training, and then you show up, you execute, you do some things. At the end of the season, it's clear all the things that happen. You can review, make your adjustments. When you're in business, no such thing. You grind for years and see no results, and then in a couple of days you get years of results. Or you build things, you know, in the helicopter business, we could fly and make money for 364 days of the year. On the 365th day, a bird would fly into the engine and destroy it, and all your profit will be gone. So that was a difficult transition, and to develop the mental state to be able to live like that was very difficult. You see a lot of athletes having difficulty retiring from athletics, and a lot of that is because it's not clear that if we do this work, if we go here, if we do that, and if these things run, this is what will happen. That is not life. And so that's a difficult transition.
Mm.
Sure. So that let me take you back to, because I was on very much a wrong track coming up to 1993. Part of what we knew we needed to do was to get a high quality coach. We actually been through a few. Met this Canadian called Sam Buck, who actually had a degree in nuclear physics and gave it up, and he started coaching bobsleigh and so on. And he was a bit of a mad scientist kind of guy. Anyway, the Canadians had just dumped him because, you know, he was a difficult person to get on with. But we took him up because he was just way and away, very knowledgeable. And Sam introduced me to the concept. And I tell you, at that time, in 1993, I was convinced that the only way to be competitive in bobsleigh was to take drugs, was to do steroids. I also realized that the complexity and cost of that was something that was way beyond anything that we could do. And I was on the verge, really, of quitting when the movie Cool Runnings came out. With, you know, a little bit of motivation, we decided to go along. But I put that argument to Sam Buck, and he said, yeah, and he knew the whole history of the drug program through all the major teams and so on. But he said, listen, on my program, we find out how the human body works, and then we see how we supercharge it with the substances that make it work. And then close to steroid level performances. And I proved that over the years. When I met Sam Buck, my 30-meter time was 4:11, and within 3 years, I was running at 3:89 for 30 meters. It's a massive improvement. And this is at the age, I started at the age of 32. And by 34, I was down to 3:89. Massive improvement on that program. So what's the basis of the program? It's based on a guy named Linus Pauling, who was a 2-time Nobel laureate, 49 doctorates. Many say the greatest scientist, including Einstein, of the 20th century, Linus Pauling, an American from Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And his prescription, his basic prescription is vitamin C is the cornerstone, and in amounts that are considered to be massive, but they aren't really when you understand the science behind it. And then the vitamins E, A, D, especially important when we live in the low sunlight environments, especially if your skin is dark. Vitamin D is made by the skin when sunlight strikes it. If you come from tropical environments, your skin is darker because the sunlight is more. If you then go into a temperate environment like London or New York, you become vitamin C, vitamin D deficient. And this is one of the big things in this pandemic is vitamin D deficiency, because one of the roles of vitamin D in the body is to regulate the body's immune response so it doesn't get out of control. And a lot of COVID-19 deaths have been because of a runaway immune response, which ends up destroying the body's organs. And I think that a big way, a simple, inexpensive way to address this is to make sure that the D levels in your population are optimum. So then you have minerals, selenium, copper, a whole range of them, but a mineral supplement every day. And vitamin mineral supplementation, and then eating. So I happen to be a vegetarian, not a vegan. I do have eggs, sometimes fish. Not a religious thing. I eat purely for performance. I eat a vegetarian diet because I suspect the quality of a lot of the meats that are available now, and I just think is a risk that's not necessary. I do consume a lot of eggs, preferably free range, preferably British eggs, which are actually way superior in how they're produced to American eggs. But the key thing is your eating window. If you can restrict your eating hours, allow your body to digest and to renew itself and so on, then a couple of things will happen. One is that you'll find your weight. And when I say find your weight, weight is not a goal, weight is not an aim. What we should aim to do is to eat properly, exercise moderately, and we'll find our weight. And that's the weight that we're supposed to be. Don't chase a weight, don't chase a look. Get the basics right, and you will achieve what your body is comfortable with. I do have quite a few posts on diet and nutrition, which I'll share with Sue and somehow get it spread around the group if anybody has more interest in that. But it's one of the things that I do in my coaching is levels of diet and nutrition from very basic to advanced. Well, the why we crashed is part of Cool Runnings that is also like the names. That's a bit fabricated, so we didn't lose any piece of the equipment as far as I know. No, there were a couple of things. First and foremost was just the fact that we went 2/10 faster at the start than I'd ever been. And when that happens, the track actually changes. There are different tracks, there are different rhythm, different timing, everything. And you need to have some experience of that before you get into it. Secondly, the team wasn't proficient. The loading after the push resulted in the number 2 man behind me getting too close to me and crowding me out, restricting my movement, which affected how I could drive the sled. And then if you were to watch that whole run, I just got a little later and later, a little further behind each corner until we crashed. Now, truth of the matter is that crash made me. It changed my life and it made my career. Everything I have now, I can trace back to that crash. If we hadn't crashed in 1988, that would have been the end of Jamaica bobsleigh. We'd have done an Eddie the Eagle type thing where we just faded away from the sport context. Even though Eddie had still managed to do his career in the way that's specialty, that's his talent. But that crash ignited not only my desire, but the whole interest and gave us the possibility to go on. So when I look back at that, I don't look back at that with any regret, because I can see, and I could see from pretty early on that was a life-changing event for me. So in that instance, it was not difficult to get over. And the physical or mental damage was not very well. Let me say, physically, I was fine. I aggravated the collarbone that I had already broken in the walk to the top. So I can't say I broke my collarbone in the crash, but I was immobilized for about 6 weeks in the shoulder region. And I knew that my head was shook up and I was concussed. That was not the worst concussion that I had in bobsled, but it was a pretty bad one, especially because I hit my head 6 or 7 times in the one crash, as I couldn't get under the cowl because the number 2 man behind me had gotten in so tight, and then we were wearing the wrong sort of helmets. We didn't have on proper bobsleigh racing helmets. We had motocross helmets with a snout, and the thing for the driver to do if your sled goes over is to go under the cowl and crawl up inside. but I couldn't get my snout past the lip of the sled, the snout of the helmet. And so I just had to relax and wait for it to end. But so long term, it physically, not much. Meant that the two things in the brain. One thing is sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, of which there was some. And you know, it really took an effort to get back in a bobsleigh and so on. But that was a battle that I fought and won. And also I was concerned for a long time about damage to the brain, not only from that crash, but I've had sort of 5 major head traumas in my bobsleigh career, as well as a lot of smaller ones. And every time you go down the run in a bobsleigh is a sort of head trauma. But again, I discovered that comes back to diet and nutrition and the well-fed brain and well-utilized brain will repair itself and will maintain itself. And so that's what I practice. And I have a particular interest in this. My father and aunt died from Alzheimer's. You know, long, slow goodbye. I am at risk, but no, I am not afraid of it anymore because I know exactly how to avoid it, and I've been doing that. And I still feel sharp as a whistle, and I hope I'm intelligible to you all. I love this question. I love this question because this is something that I am trying to get across to everybody I see. The mind and the body are not different things. Right? People take your mind because we conceive of the mind as the place where thought originates, and we think that the neurons going and firing and so on is what controls the body and makes us who we are. So first, that isn't true. The body has at least 3 centers that do pretty much the same thing that the brain does. One is in your gut, in your stomach. The other one is down your spine, and then your brain. Your brain is an organ in your body, like all the rest. It's a very important organ, as is the liver, as is the heart, a very important organ, but it is an organ nonetheless. So the brain can't be separated from the body, and you can't talk about mental health in the absence of physical health. Now, I understand the angle where if you are depressed, you have issues and so on, it's going to be hard to motivate yourself to do anything physical. And I would flip that and explain that if you're in bad physical condition as well, you're very likely to be depressed and to have mental health issues. The two things are not separable. The key is to start with what you eat, how you eat it, when you eat. Before you move a muscle or do any thinking, get those things right. If the right stuff is coming into your brain, if you're not spiking with sugar 2-3 times a day and running, giving your brain an insulin spike, and if those things aren't happening, then that organ is going to settle down and it's going to start functioning properly. And the consequence of that is that you will feel better. You'll actually feel better. Exercise releases dopamine, which is one of the substances that lets you feel better. There's a whole host of connections, and again, I'll go into them on detail, and so on. I will talk about that afterwards and get you guys some access. But the things are so related that we need to understand that there is no possible way to have any sustained good mental health without being physically healthy. When I'm talking about physically healthy, I'm not talking about running the 100 meters in 10.5 seconds, right? There are optimum biomarkers of what should be in your blood at what levels and so on. And you know, if we pay attention to those things, pay attention to the food we eat, how we eat it, get a moderate amount of exercise, and do some constructive things, then the brain is going to fall in line with the body. They are one thing, and you'll have health. That was one of the surprising things to me. I was petrified going back to Jamaica after the 88 games and the 88 crash. So we were famous in Canada, and there's a lot of partying, the other guys, and fun and good times, and you know, the team was feted everywhere and so on. But Jamaica is a nation with a proud tradition of sport, and I was well aware of that, and a number of the leading journalists had been, they weren't impressed with the whole Jamaica bobsleigh theory and how the thing went out, and they wrote a lot of bad stuff about us before we went. So I was prepared for a real battering on return. And when we got back, there were crowds at the airport, and people were so proud of what we tried, because we hadn't actually achieved anything. They were proud of what we tried, how brave we were, and that we were in the snow and that we were on the ice. And that was one of the key moments for me that helped with my personal resolve. To see that reaction, I decided to go on. And it's also one of the reasons, among other things, but why I didn't get into the drug trap. And also, I retired when I did, which was after Nagano in 1998. But I've always been very aware of what Jamaica bobsleigh means to the nation of Jamaica, to young people everywhere, and that it transcended my individual ambition, which was a hard pill for me to swallow, but swallow it I did, and I had to move on and leave it in a place where it could continue in the minds of people and give them that relief. Mixed emotions, because I knew the journey and the things that she'll be up against and what will be required. And I actually, I mean, I took her and put her on the ice myself for the first time and spent some considerable time with her. So yes, I was, I would say, brutally candid in telling her what to expect and in putting her under the pressure. You know, the things that I've spoken to you about here are I mean, I didn't jot this down for catalyst. I know you're all great guys and so on, but these are thoughts that have been with me for many, many years. There's another 3 words that I use, which my own children, my niece, everybody who know me roll their eyes and bow their heads. But in bobsleigh, not much different from life. But what happens is that it's, you know, whatever you're doing that has any meaning is a struggle. There's going to be an element of struggle. And with struggle, you suffer. Those 2 things go together. You're going to struggle, you're going to suffer, you still have to try. You still have to try, you still have to find a way to try. And this is what I tried to get across to her, my niece, to all the young people coming into the sport, and to people I meet all along, trying to get that across to you as well. Don't expect that you're not going to have to struggle at some point, and don't expect that struggling is not going to lead to some suffering on your path. And those are big steps towards mental health. Don't set yourself up to think that everything is going to be all right all the time and smooth, and unless it is, then there is something dramatically wrong. Work your resolve, find a way to try.